We go ahead and get started. Appreciate everyone being with us today. And one last thing I'll just share, just as a quick reminder. The whole purpose of these sessions is for us to be interactive with each other and not this to be just a one-way voice, just with I'm sharing things with you. So I encourage for you to either send me direct notes, and the way to do that in the chat is to send it to host and panelists. But if you're okay, and if you do that, I will do my best to not reference you by name. But if you happen to have any direct feedback, or if you're okay with everyone knowing, you can go ahead and send that directly to everyone, and I'll be sure to reference you by name. So you should be stop guessing, start growing, master your 2026 security marketing budget and strategies. Just a little bit about us, and today is not about us. Uh, Appreciate the smiley face as well, James. So today is not about us. Today is about you. But I will say, as I've mentioned, usually and typically all of these webinars, we're very big advocates of that of the industry and the associations. We're proud members of these particular groups. We've been doing this in March. It'll be 15 years, and I got to tell you, it has been such a journey, and we have learned so much. With that said, in terms of like how we help, we do, of course, provide marketing services for that of the entire industry listed here in terms of these things. And we work with the entire ecosystem, including alarm dealers, integrators, guard patrol companies, fire alarm companies, and the vendors that help to support. A little bit about myself for those of us that don't know each other, because as I'm taking a look at that of today's participants, and I see a few new individuals have just jumped in over the last minute or two. Just as a quick reminder for those that just hopped in, want for today to be really interactive. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat. If you are okay with everyone knowing that you asked the question, make sure that you can select the everyone so everyone will know that it's you that sent it. If you would prefer not to be known who asked that question, and that's perfectly a-okay, uh, make sure you hit host and panelists, and only I will know as to that you to ask that question, and I'll do my absolute best to not reference you by name. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, I would love to connect, and I have been very blessed to speak at many of our industry's biggest events and biggest voices. And most recently, it was great seeing a number of you at GSX here a few weeks back, and had a really lively session there where we talked about remote guarding. I also want to give a big thanks to my entire team, but also want to give a big thanks to Isabella, who follows up with each of you to make sure that you have today's session on your actual calendar. Because I'll tell you, for me, if it's not on my calendar, it does not exist. If you are interested in scheduling a time to speak, feel free to use this QR code or reach out to Isabella. One big thing I want to share really quickly is, and I know it's hard to see me, but I've got my copy of the latest Security Business magazine. We're really grateful. For those of you, I think most of you know this, we've had a column, Marketing Madmen, in SDM magazine since January of 2014 through September a couple of months ago. In October's edition, we transitioned to have a new column called Marketing Matters. And if you'd like to scan this QR code, you can read this. If you have, I've had a few individuals over the weekend and last week and even this week that have sent me pictures of our article, which is right here. I think it's page 24 and 25. And the very first article that we wrote for them is on, once again, on your purple cow. I know it's hard to see this, but it's your purple cow moment. Love to get some of your feedback on that. This next one, and as we go forward, we'll have a monthly column called Marketing Matters once again. But the very first one is all about the purple cow, which is all about standing out when most security companies are virtually offering very similar things. It's like, how do we become remarkable or stand out when you've got all of the, in this particular case with Purple Cow, you've got all these cows that are basically the same. We want to stick out. And that the whole same thing holds true with that of our security company. So with that said, the other thing is in just a couple, actually, I think it's like literally just a couple of short weeks, I'll have Vince from our team, who's our head of copy, with me as well. If you're heading to ISC East, send me a note. I'd love to spend some time together. And your first beverage of choice is on me, whether it's leaded or unleaded. Love to spend some time together. There's a QR code here if you'd like to schedule time together, or you can reach out to myself or to Isabella. We'd love to schedule time if you're heading to IS East. Uh, one or two last quick things, and we're going to get into today's curriculum. So, a big thanks, of course, to our team and to each and every single one of you for spending time, whether you're watching this live or on demand. But I'd like to give a big thanks to our two incredible sponsors, and that's NAPCO and Recognize. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with Recognize, Recognize is a leader in outdoor slash perimeter detection, and they use AI-based solutions, and it's more of a platform. If video surveillance is something that you do, which is virtually every single one of us, and you have not taken a look at Recognize, I'd really challenge you to take a look at them because everything is wireless. It's all AI based. It's high value RMR, but take into consideration, it's a way to layer additional services with that of the end user customers that you work with, especially on that of whether it's super high-end residential or commercial. And this is anything from, obviously like, the given is going to be like construction sites, things in this regard, but even to like utilities and things in that regard and remote sites. Whereas it's prohibitive from having that of, cabling or even signals and things in that regard. So I will ask with both Recognize and with NAPCO, if you'll let them know that your good friends at SD Marketing sent you, I'd greatly appreciate that. And speaking of NAPCO, NAPCO is one of our industry pillars. They have been around, frankly, if you're a security company, you could literally, when I say security, it could be security or fire and life safety. I mean, you can literally, okay, maybe I shouldn't say in a literal sense, but you can almost run your entire business using that of the NAPCO suite of products and solutions. And really appreciative for our good friends at NAPCO as well as Recognized for sponsoring today's webinar. And it's actually been for quite some time. So a big thank you to both of you. I'm going to quickly just walk through a couple of questions as we get started, and then we'll get into the actual content. Now, I will say here, with that, this is where I'd like for each of you to get your phones out, and I will do the same. If you wouldn't mind scanning this QR code, and yeah, if you wouldn't mind scanning this QR code, I'm gonna just go to the next. I'll give this just another 2 seconds. QR code is still there. So there's 3 quick questions, and these 3 quick questions are all multiple choice. I would like for everyone to answer this honestly in terms, and keep in mind, these are all, how do I say, they're all anonymous. So I don't know, no one knows as to how you're answering this. And what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to compare how are you answering this, pardon me, versus that of your, your peers and or potentially competitors throughout the country. So it's like, where are you with your 2026 marketing budget? Is it, I'm sorry, you said, what budget? We wing it, right? And I got to tell you, no one knows as to who you are. I appreciate you being honest. I appreciate each of you being honest with this. But I want for you to look at this as how are you compared versus others? So it's like we wing it, we're rough draft, we haven't started yet, it's finalized and documented. We have a total budget, but no channel breakdown yet. So as we take a look at this, virtually 3 out of 4 of us, 3/4 of our 75%, it's not surprising. I would love to have seen some in the others. And I appreciate everyone answering this honestly, but it does not surprise me that virtually 100% of us either, haven't started, it's a rough draft, or what budget we wing it, which is number 1. Question number 2 is, where does the majority of your current marketing budget go to? Now, look, I realize many of us have said, well, what budget we're winging it, so to speak. So, obviously we are spending money, well, I guess you're correct me if I'm wrong here. We don't have a marketing budget yet. So that's half, is it website, SEO content? Is it all over the place with no clear focus? Is it Google Ads / PPC? Is it trade shows / events? Is it social media? So we'll give this just another moment or so. And once again, appreciate everyone spending or everyone sharing that of their feedback with us on this. So we'll give this just another sec. So, once again, this does not surprise me that all over the place and no clear focus. By the way, today, one thing that I want to share, this is really important. The session that we're leading today, this literally could be like a 6 to 8 hour session, whereas this could be more of a workshop style. Clearly, we don't have that time. There are four resources, and a big thanks once again to the team. We've been working as much work as we went into today's slides. The resources. Keep in mind, stick around to the end because these resources, we have four resources that are spreadsheets slash checklists that'll actually help you with these kinds of things so you can start building things out. We're going to talk about the theory here in just a few minutes. We're going to be talking about some of the specific channels, things in that regard, where we should be allocating this. But to me, it does not surprise me that this is the case, that it's all over the place with us, a clear focus. Last question really quickly is, do you have a documented, not budget, but do you have a documented marketing plan in place for 26? And yes, we do, partially. No, we don't. Yes, and we're building one right now. So let's have everyone answer this. Give this just another 5 to 7 seconds. Okay, so we'll give this just another moment, and I love this. We're building one right now, and that's why we're here. Well, thank you. I appreciate each and every single one of you being present as I'm taking a look at. Yes, yes, yes. Awesome. It is great to see everyone here. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, so with that said, let me go back here and we will get into things. Okay. So if we look at the challenge of today, or what the problem is, and this is where we talk, just if we look at just the questions that were just answered over these last couple of minutes, it's this guessing game itself. It is something that is potentially killing the growth of our security company. And I've got to tell you, what does not get measured, it's like we always have to know the end in mind. So it's because if we don't know where we're going, how are we going to get there? It's like, for example, a couple of things to take into consideration. It's like, we may be staring at blank spreadsheets. We're now in the middle of it's now, if we're watching this live, it's the beginning of November. We're in the middle of Q4 2025. And if we're looking at blank screenshots without any guidance, that's a big challenge. Keep in mind, across the board on the average, digital ad costs are eating up margins because, according to some studies and some data and research, and these are things that we see as well, there's up to a 40% year over year rise in digital ad costs. And if we take into consideration that of some of our competitors, in fact, have strategic plans and they're capturing that of our prospects. And as far as I'm concerned, that is not acceptable. And that's the whole point of us spending time together on this. And the pressure to prove return on investment, but not having there's pressure to approve that of an ROI. But the challenge is there's not really a system as we take into consideration once again the questions that we just answered. And look, the cost of guessing wrong potentially could be as little as $18,000 plus per year wasted annually with opportunities lost. And by the way, for those of us, that are much larger, you can literally add, you double, triple, quadruple, or even add a 10x to this, depending upon the size of our particular group. In terms of what our promises of today is, you're going to be walking away over these next 60 minutes with an actual framework. And in terms of the framework, it'll be a budget allocation framework with exact percentages by channel, so we're not guessing. We're going to talk about some of these things, but then we're going to leave you some things for some homework. And for those of you that would like some help with putting this together, I am going to be out the next couple of weeks. I think I'll be in town one day over the next couple of weeks. But I would love to schedule some time together so that we can look to put together a plan together for 2026, even if it does not mean that we're working together. Okay. All right. So we have one of our good friends here. I won't name you by name. That's asking a question with a ha at the end. What's a digital ad? All right. Obviously, I know you're joking, but in terms of what is a digital ad, it's obviously advertising that's done, whereas you can access it on your computer or this. But and look, all joking aside, whereas, these in our industry for our channel are important. And in some of the industries that we work with, some of the commercial end users, those types of things, traditional things, direct mail things in that regard. But I'll tell you what, remember, it's what's happened over especially these last 5 years. Number one, and you've heard me say this before, we now have the attention span that's less than that of a goldfish. Number one. Number two is, we spend so much time, I get notifications as to how much time I spend on this device. I think it's every Sunday morning. reflecting on the week before, and that's not taking into consideration how much time I've spent on my computer. And my point being here is, whereas our customers, our prospects, and they may not be spending that same amount of time. Keep in mind, many of them do spend a fair amount of time. We have to make sure that we are present where our prospects are, whether they're the residential end user or that of the commercial end user. So the other things are, we're going to provide you with an ROI tracking dashboard. So it's going to be a system that proves the value of marketing. We also will have a 12-month marketing roadmap template. So this is going to be an execution calendar. And by the way, these are all the resources that we're going to provide you at the end of today's session. And we're going to talk about actual real industry benchmarks. So this is going to be some of these things you're going to want to jot and take some screenshots of some of these things, because I even have a slide that talks about by lead channel, what should you be achieving, experiencing, and things in that regard. And then last but not least is one of the resources and tools is a system. So it's a spreadsheet where you enter in some data. Whereas we can identify what's not working and look to reinvest strategically. And by the way, next month, which we'll talk about that in just a few minutes, we're going to talk about the specific channels, each and every single channel where we should be focusing our efforts on and things in that regard as we close out 26 and move into 2020, close out 25 and move into 26. Okay, so when we look at why making decisions matter now for 2026 is, keep in mind, it's the perfect storm. There's so many changes that have happened. And obviously, I know we're not digging deep into AI today, although hint, hint, January, we may be, that will be our topic. All right, I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag. But keep in mind with AI, digital competitors, etc., everything has changed and things are moving at lightning speed. And if we're not planning, if we're not measuring, if we are not really paying close attention, we don't have a plan, we're going to put ourselves in a big challenge. You take into consideration, this is now the time to start focusing our efforts on how are we going to approach things for 2026. You take into consideration, once again, I've mentioned this before, but our competitors, in many cases, they're finalizing that of their strategic plans at this very moment. Keep in mind, groups, and this is not just in our industry, this is out of our industry as well, but companies that have a well-documented plan, and this is a proven fact, they outperform that of reactive companies 2 to 3 times. I got to tell you, for us, we went so many years without having plans. Now we were very strategic in the way that we plan things out, not just for things like this in terms of webinar, but all of the ways, all of these shows that we're attending, the ways that we market, we were very systematic. Everything is based on SOPs. We have various members of the team that are focused on certain key objectives. We make sure that we are email marketing, with consistency. And not to get too much in the weeds here, but it is so critically important to make sure that we're not being just reactive, but we're being proactive, if that makes sense. I'll tell you what, look, and including ourselves, if we miss this window, another year of guessing and lost opportunities are going to happen. And what's going to happen is the potential growth is not going to be there in terms of what we're looking to achieve. So let's talk about like 3 fatal mistakes. I know there's a lot of, and some of these slides are going to have a lot of information. This is where you may want to take some screenshots. And I'm going to get really deep into some of these things. But there's 3 budgetary mistakes that security companies make. And let's talk about how to avoid them. So mistake number 1, we just talked about this, not having a documented plan. And what we mean by that is we're spending reactively based on, who called last week. Or, I've got, or you have maybe someone on the sales team that's saying, hey, we need to be doing this. Maybe one of the executives is like, well, hey, what about that? We have someone that calls to us and it's like, it's a shiny object syndrome. And it's like, well, that sounds really convincing. Let's try it. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be trying things, but we need to be trying things that adhere to that of our, meaning we've got to focus on our plan first, and then we can look to add things, sprinkle those new things on. And here's the thing, how we fix this is we document our plan with actual, not just annual goals, but quarterly goals. And we're focused on that of the tactics on a month in, month out basis. Let's look at mistake number 2. I'll tell you what, Henry Wanamaker was known as the godfather of advertising. And I don't remember the exact year. I believe it was in the late 1800s or the early 1900s. And he was coined with, half my advertising works, the other half doesn't. The problem is I don't know which half. Remember, we're at the end of 2025. I've shared this with you before. That is no longer the case. It is critical to have tracking in place because then we don't know where leads are coming from. Are they just coming from referrals? Are they coming from Google? Are they coming from direct mail? Are they coming from email? Are they coming from SEO? Are they coming from trade shows? Are they coming from that of strategic referral partners, et cetera, et cetera? And the challenge with this is we want to ensure that we are identifying what are some of the underperforming channels, and we don't want to keep funding them because it's something we've always done, if that makes sense. Number three is the wrong channel mix. We don't want to, it's like we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket. We want to make sure that we are diversifying ourselves. We want to, ignore that of referrals or content and partnerships that deliver the lower CAC, stands for customer acquisition cost. In other words, what's the effective cost per lead? What's the conversion rates? And then when we multiply what's the conversion rate times the effective cost per lead, that will let us know what the average customer acquisition cost or CAC is. We look at what the fix is we can diversify ourselves, because the other thing to take into consideration, look, Google has algorithms, Google has changes, Facebook has changes. Keep in mind, there's been so many horror stories where it's like, let's say that, someone's relying mostly on like Facebook and Instagram for that of leads. And by the way, it's a really important channel. So I definitely encourage for those of us that are not looking at, and even for those of us that are B2B, to look at Facebook and Instagram as a channel. And I don't mean just the organic posting. I'm talking about ads, because there's ways to target even the commercial end user in that regard. But we can pick on any of these. But if we look at email, earlier this year, I think, no, actually, I think it was last year, there was a big issue with that of deliverability. And my point being here is we cannot be reliant on just one channel. We've got to diversify ourselves. It is key and critical, obviously based on things that are actually performing. So here's a couple of quick wins that we can implement that of this week. For mistake number one, block. And by the way, Friday is tomorrow, for those of us that are on live. Block out an hour or two and complete the budget allocation framework. That we're going to have that download for you. Mistakes to be able to help. Quick win for mistake number two is add a lead source column to that of the spreadsheet and start tracking that today, because we want to make sure that we know of the leads that are coming in. It's like yesterday I was speaking with a good friend of mine. One of the groups that we're about to get started off with, I've known him for a number of years. In his marketing, he's very, very sophisticated, utilizing HubSpot, and he knows all of the major sources. He knows to a T, what is its effective cost per lead by channel. He knows exactly, where are all of the leads coming from? How is that comparing month over month, seasonality within his market, things in that regard. And that's because, once again, there's specialized tracking URLs so that we know traffic that's coming to our website from that of email versus ads. And when I say ads, I'm talking about LSA, versus Google Ads PPC versus Facebook ads. Versus search engine optimization. And we're able to, once again, it's key and critical. So let's talk about mistake number three. Audit the last 90 days of your spend. And I know some of us are not spending consistently in marketing right now, but for the things that we're doing, if we're not doing marketing, audit where your sales team is spending their time. By the way, these principles that we're discussing, this is not limited to that of just marketing. You want to apply this to each and every single one of the aspects and elements of that of your business. So when we talk about that of a budget allocation framework, let's use a hypothetical. We're going to use a hypothetical scenario here. And let's say, for example, when it comes to the allocation framework, anywhere from a quarter to about a third of your budget should be geared towards paid ads. And this is going to be, it's not limited to this, but the primary or the usual suspects are going to be, like Google ads, which is pay-per-click, LSA, which is that of the local service ads. And this is the pay-per-lead section within that of the Google. By the way, with all of these, if you go into the webinar section on our website, we have webinars that do deep dives into each of these, just as a FYI for those of you that this is the first time that you're here with us today. Facebook, LinkedIn, various pay-per-click campaigns. Also, maybe a fifth to a quarter to this should be on content marketing. And when we look at content marketing, this is not just creating blogs or search engine optimization, but it's also video. Keep in mind, I'm gonna ask a rhetorical question, but what's look, and once again, I realize the chat GPTs of the world are really taking some share away from Google. But the number two search engine historically is owned by Google, which is YouTube. So if you're not producing video, and I know it's hard to see me, but all of us have one of these. You can invest in, $5, $10, $15 in like a selfie stick, or you can have, various tools that will help you so that you can keep things, so that you're in good shape here. Uh, Remember, our customers, like, do not take for granted that our customers know all of the things that we do. We always want to be giving value to that of the industries and the markets that we serve, and be known, liked, and trusted. So important. How is that done? Content marketing is big and key in this. What the ads does is this allows us to implement things. And then events. Now, keep in mind, look, some of us may be Resi, some of us may be Resi SMB, some of us may be Resi SMB and commercial, some of us may be SMB and commercial, or any combination thereof. Events, sponsorships, chambers of commerce, if there's specific vertical markets in your markets that you focus on, look for various, groups and local associations in that. You want to make sure that you are networking, perhaps even direct mail. All these things are important. We want to allocate, anywhere from 15 to 20% to that. Partnership and referrals are really, really important. And then also, last but not least, is the tools. Remember, I'd mentioned about how AI has changed everything. We want to make sure, in order to properly measure, you've got to make sure that you have all these measurement mechanisms in place, and everything fuels into that of the CRM. And there are a number of CRMs. I referenced HubSpot, but there are hundreds of CRM. There are industry CRMs as well. That you can look at as well. The other big thing is ensure that you've got your Google Analytics in place, your Google Search Console. Make sure that you have all the proper tracking tags there, things in this regard. I know I'm skipping through some of these. There's a lot of depth and detail around any of these. As any of you have any questions about this, feel free to schedule a time with me and we can dig deeper into this. And once again, I'd be happy to walk you through this and be a little more specific. Okay, so really quickly, let's talk about like a sample, like a hypothetical 2 million a year security integrator. But we're going to talk about budgets here in just a sec. We're going to talk about budgets here in just a sec. But let's talk about a 2 million a year security integrator. And let's say that the marketing budget is 7%, because I get asked all the time, well, what percentage of my revenue should I be allocating? We're going to talk about this a little bit more in detail here in just a sec. But 7% budget equals 140,000 over the year. And if you want to look at a particular sample as to how would that look, that would be paid media would be approximately 32.67 per month, whereas content marketing would be just under 31,000 a year. The event/offline would be 2,100 a month. Partnerships would be 1,400 a month. And by the way, when we talk about this could be referral fees and things in that regard. And I realize that there are some, how do I say this? There are some industries where we have to be careful about them. Like, for example, with I think realtors, attorneys, etc. I know we've got to be careful of that stuff, but keep these things in mind. And then obviously tools and operations, it's over $2,300 a month. Let's see here. Okay, bear with me for just a sec here. So Patrick asked, okay, your example of 2 million, is that the total install, service, and RMR, or just the non-RMR? Okay, Patrick, that's a great question. So when we talk about this $2 million, I'm talking about total revenue. So obviously we are an industry that is all about RMR. And I realize when it comes to the integration revenue, there is a lot of cost. And that's why, by the way, this number is not like 15, 20, 30%. Obviously, when certain companies are getting started, and if you're a startup, the numbers are going to be much bigger than that. And look, there are many prominent integrators that are in the 1 to 2% range. and they really put a big emphasis on that of how do I say this on that of sales. And I'm not saying that we should be lowering our investment in sales, but if you think about it, like when I say in theory, without us even going a step further, knowing that our prospects are online, knowing that, remember, because of this device here, because of all of the access. I mean, whether it's Google, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's the industry blogs, whether it's our websites, never before in the history of our country have our customers ever had access to the data that they have now. And I don't mean to go off into tangents, but Patrick, what you just asked, it's a really good question. Keep in mind, have you noticed, and I'm asking this more rhetorically, if we were together in person, I know I'd see all of you shaking your heads at me. But have you ever noticed that like our customers, whether they're right or wrong, they're coming more well informed? And where I'm going with this is when we look at this at a whole and all of our marketing that we're doing, that's integrated with sales and that's in the same direction in terms of what we're communicating. It is so critical for us to control the narrative in terms of what Google says about us, i.e., where we're positioned, what we have on our websites, what we're pushing out on our social media, the videos that we're producing, all of these things. It is critically important because remember, most prospects are out of market. We want to ensure that they know, like, and trust us. So in other words, when they matriculate from out of market to in market, in other words, they're not actively searching for what we do, but in fact, they transition to wanting to do to the services that we provide. We don't want them to go to Google. We want them to come to us. And why? Because they know, like, and trust us. So Patrick, thank you for asking that question. And if feel free to interject on the Q&A and or the that of the chat. Okay, so yeah, Steve, really good point. EBITDA, which is earnings before what is it? Oh gosh, earnings before. It's basically the earnings before that of taxes. All right. Now I'm a little embarrassed. I know what that means. I'm gonna remember exactly what EBITDA is, but it's basically your earnings. But yeah, it has become a lot more important. And this is where once again, thank you, interest and taxation. Appreciate that, Steve. So, but the thing is, this is where, I'm not going to go back in slides, but this is where it's critical for us to, always be evaluating. Because if we don't know, how can we make changes on things that we're not measuring? Uh, look, here's the thing. For those of us that have competitive intelligence, here's what winners do differently. And what separates groups that are really growing not 1 to 5%, but that are growing 7 to 10, 15, 20%, let alone growing much higher. And I'm not talking about through acquisition. And I'm not saying, look, acquisition is a great thing. And we should always be on the lookout if we're in a position for strategic acquisitions to help us grow through acquisition. But we always need to be looking at growing organically. So, if you take into consideration companies that are growing, 10 to 15 to 20% annually, excuse me. And by the way, I promise you this is most definitely the case. Keep in mind, they're documenting their marketing plan and they have quarterly reviews. By the way, there is a, EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System. There's a book called Traction. A good friend of mine in the industry turned me on to that a number of years back. If you're not following this, take a look at that. And you want it, so that's Traction by Gino Wickman, if my memory serves me correct. You also want to allocate, at the very least 7% of your revenue strategically across all channels. And this includes that of headcount, whether you have internal marketing resources or if you have 30, or if you have that of external, or you're working with like third-party marketing resources as well. You want to make sure you're tracking your channel religiously. You want to make sure you know your numbers. You want to make sure you're adjusting monthly based on data, not just on the gut. And you're viewing marketing as a growth investment, not an expense. Some of the groups that have been stuck in the same revenue over the last years, they don't have, on the other hand, they don't have a marketing plan. They have a very little spend. They can't tell you which channels are generating the leads. They're flying blind. They're making decisions based on gut feelings and not, and sales calls. And they're viewing marketing as a necessary evil cost to minimize. Yeah. And here's why tracking matters. without it, you're flying blind, right? We don't know where the leads are coming from. We're, funding underperforming tactics, things in this regard. But when we have that of ROI tracking, we're being data driven. We know exactly which cost per lead is by channel, and we're cutting waste immediately, meaning we're not letting things simmer over there. And we're proving value with out of concrete data. We're making confident optimization, and we know what's working. No more guessing. So here's something you may want to take a snapshot of. If you take into consideration some benchmarks, and keep in mind, look, your numbers may vary from this, but keep in mind, we've got a significant number of data that we're working with here. And if we take into consideration, if you look here on the towards the left, towards the right, obviously, red versus green. By the way, whereas the cost per lead with like trade shows slash events may be anywhere from like $110 to $300 plus. I am not insinuating that we should not be doing that. Because keep in mind, there's a lot of value at trade shows beyond that, of just the actual lead generation. And look, even for those of us that are residential, there's home shows. And I know some groups that I speak with, they have done away with home shows on the resi side. But keep these things in mind. From the Google Ads perspective, on the pay per click, we are seeing here anywhere from like $50 to $125 per lead. Whereas on the local service ads, and keep in mind, this is pay per click, this is pay per lead. We're seeing on the average anywhere from $60 to $120 per lead. Keep in mind, this goes across the country. So it's not necessarily, your markets might be a little different, if that makes sense. Also from the Facebook perspective, and we do have some groups that are actually at cost per leads. They're a lot less here on Facebook slash Instagram. Keep in mind, your offer is going to be really important. It's, when it comes to ads, whereas you are not, I'm going to oversimplify this, but it is about having the right message in front of the right audience at the right time. And with Facebook, keep in mind, usually whether it's Facebook or Instagram, typically it's going to be someone that's scrolling on their phone, where we want to make sure that we are targeting them, if that makes sense, making sure that so that we can have an ad that's specifically targeted to them. And you don't necessarily want to just drive users to your website and have forms filled out there or the phone picked up. There are what's referred to as lead form or lead gen ads. And because this usually will have the user stay on Facebook or Instagram, which Facebook wants so that they can monetize those users longer, if that makes sense. But it is key and critical to make sure that you have mechanisms to follow up with them immediately and often. Because if you let those leads simmer even for like 24 to 48 hours, they may forget that they even filled out a form about you. So, referral programs are going to be really, really important. And with these referral programs, in some cases, I would challenge you to actually spend a lot more, perhaps than, $100 in things in that regard. So keep because we want to, keep in mind, usually individuals that are referred to you usually are going to have a much higher conversion rate, number one. Number two, they're usually going to layer services. So they're going to be more profitable and things in that regard. So keep that in mind. I'm going to address the question that just came in, Scott. So, when in terms of SEO and organic content, look, I will say this: SEO does take time. In some cases, things can happen within the first few days of changes happening. But in terms of having like a more meaningful type outcomes from SEO, these things do take time. And these are investments of things. And keep in mind, Google and even the answer engines, their algorithms are constantly changing. The key here is, remember, methodical and steady wins the race. You want to make sure that we're making strategic investments in developing content and information that is useful and beneficial, helpful, and authoritative from the perspective of Google, but also from the perspective of users that are reading this. And remember, some of the factors are, what is the dwell time? In other words, how much time is spent on the pages of this? Because virtually not every single website, but a large portion of the internet has Google Analytics. So they have access to a tremendous amount of data. So Scott, that's a great question. Are we not a big fan of LinkedIn ads? We are a huge fan of LinkedIn. What I will say is there's the organic aspect of LinkedIn and the other social channels, and there's the paid version of it. I will say this, and Scott, not to get too deep in the weeds here, for a group such as yourself, whereas you have, like the average customer value is very significant, not just from the integration revenue perspective, but also from their RMR perspective. I would most definitely consider LinkedIn as an opportunity, but I will say this, and I'm going to say this not from the B2C perspective, but from the B2B perspective. We have had very similar, like exact ads that are running to a very similar audience. Obviously on LinkedIn, for those of you that have not advertised on LinkedIn, keep in mind you're able to target according to demographics, because when we sign up for LinkedIn as a user of LinkedIn, LinkedIn knows what company we work for, the size of our company, geographically where we are, how active we are, what industry we're in, what, and and then some. Where I'm going with this is those are all elements that we can target towards. So, like for example, let's say that we want to be targeting auto dealerships, or we want to be targeting construction companies or general contractors, an example. We can on LinkedIn we can target to those. Or let's say that we provide access control to healthcare, to like hospitals, as an example. So we can literally go to, in our area, we can target that of the job titles, or the individuals that are, let's say, in security, in healthcare. Like we can target to that. So I just, what I will say is there are in fact ways to target to that same audience, not exactly the same, but that same audience on Facebook and Instagram on a B2B basis, and put yourself in a, like, the ROI will be significantly different. If you take into consideration, like what we see usually is hundreds of dollars on a cost per lead basis for LinkedIn. That's not always the case, but we usually will see Facebook outperform LinkedIn, even, Scott, even for yourself. Obviously, I know your security business very well. What I would do if I were you is I would diversify. I would have two campaigns that are targeting, and we can talk, Scott, offline about this in terms of how to get the audiences as close as possible so that you can have a real split test and see for yourself. Although you're going to say, Dave, okay, your numbers were not exactly the case, but I see exactly what you're saying. The key, though, and I'll finish with Scott, and then I know, Patrick, you just asked a question as well. The key here is we've got to make sure that we are following with these individuals very, very rapidly, if that makes sense. So thank you. I appreciate that, Scott. So Patrick, see, do you have a per sales cost rather than per lead counts? I'm asking industry average broken out by geographics, commercial versus residential, and system type. Sorry for the specifics. Oh, Patrick, great question. I'm going to answer this as specific as I can, but I would love to actually have a conversation with you if you're open to it, and we can dig really deep into this. So I will say, though, from the per sales cost, it's really challenging for us to have that data. And I say this because we work with groups that are really sophisticated, and they have that data so that they can let us know what their CAC is, customer acquisition cost. Because remember, once again, they know to a T their CAC by by channel, if that makes sense. And ideally, this is the way we get things set up. Now, this is where you have to invest some time in your CRM, as well as the things that we're talking about now, to make sure that we have proper tracking so that we attribute a lead and ultimately a sale to a particular channel. Now, one of the challenges, not to get too much in the weeds here, is what happens if I, originally found you on organic, but then I came to you via an ad, and then I came through a couple of emails, and then I filled out, and then I was on your chat bot. It's like, well, where do we allocate that towards? Or perhaps, retargeting or remarketing as an example. So, there's where things get a little sticky. But, usually the first point of entry is what's tracked. In some cases, it's going to be the last point of entry that was tracked. Also, in terms of the geographics, we do not have it broken out by a geography presently. So these numbers that I'm sharing with you are going to be across the board nationwide. On a one-off basis, I can share some things with you, offline if you'd like. And the thing is, in terms of commercial versus residential, okay, I'll try and see, this is a really good question, and this question could literally be the basis for an entire hour. But so I'm going to be really quick about this. It's interesting, Patrick. There are some keywords. I know you all are it's going to be a little bit of a head scratcher here, but there are in fact some residential keywords that are more expensive than that of the commercial keywords. And it's like, to me, it doesn't make any sense because if you look at the average value of a commercial versus a residential, perhaps we're talking about, you know, $5,000 to $10,000 on the resi over the lifetime, over the 7, 8 year cycle, versus a commercial is going to be perhaps 100. I'm just making this number up, but $100,000 or 50,000. It's interesting. And by the way, here's a little hint. For those of us that are full service security companies that do fire as well, keep in mind fire because there's a lot less competition and knowing that Google's all on an auction basis. A lot of the fire opportunities or keywords and phrases are less expensive than some of their counterparts in security. And I will say this, and I'll move on right now, but all these things are interrelated, and I appreciate you all allowing me to go off into tangents here, but hopefully this is helpful for everyone. To me, look at it as, with the groups that we work with and what we've experienced over the years, is you want to have that foot in the door offer. How do you get an end user to come to us? Because remember, and I don't know everyone here, but most of us that I know here, we are all very similar. We're independent, local. And I'm talking about on the security company slash fire alarm company front. We're local. We're competing with that of the nationals and things in that regard, like the Simply Safes. And I have many friends at ADT, but the ADTs of the world is an example. And where I'm going with this is what we bring to the table is we do the sales process differently. We go through the installation differently. We're building a custom solution. Yes, it is built on our frameworks. We're not literally designing from scratch a system, although, and I mean that in a literal sense. We are designing a custom system based on the frameworks, the technology partners that we work with, and what the needs are, so that you're asking the right questions. So my point being here is that foot in the door is going to really position us very well. And then as you have the foot in the door and as you get them started, then you're layering services with them so that you can layer services. And I know we all know this, but the more layered we are with services, the lower the attrition rate, the more value we're delivering, the higher the RMR, the higher the integration and things in that regard. Okay, so Steve says, can we send the slides via email? Yes, we can. Steve, send a note. Well, I think Isabella is with us as well. So we'll take a note, Steve, and we could send you slides along with a replay as well. Absolutely. Okay, so I know I'm a little behind here. I'm gonna fast forward a couple of these things here. If you want to take a screenshot of some of these things here, but there is an action plan that talks about over this literally the next week, the next month, and that of the next 90 days. And that's what these downloads that I'm going to have for you here shortly are going to be. Also, keep in mind ultimately the solution. Well, let me keep moving forward because there's a couple things I want to cover. I know we're a little up against time here. Keep in mind, Steve, yes. Oh, my apologies, Steve. Yes, we do have your emails, and yes, you should be getting our emails as well. My apologies for calling you out. I'll make sure that Isabella reaches out to you directly. I'll make sure that Isabella reaches out to you directly. We can speak offline about these. Make sure that anything that you like, we're in good shape. Thank you. I appreciate that. I am trying my best to be respectful of everyone, but anyhow. Okay, so there's 7 areas whereas we can look to cut waste and reallocate it towards things that are making sense. What I'm going to say, just because the fast forward here really quickly, is we really want to be focusing, especially if we have limited budgets. Local service ads is definitely something we would highly recommend. Once again, I have a deep dive into that. I think as of 3-4 months ago. So it's on our website if you'd like to learn more about that. Or obviously, once again, we can speak directly about that. Also, SEO, it's more of that long term, but remember, these are investments that will pay dividends over time. And then really digging deep into how can you generate a referral program? Like I'll give you an example. I don't, and I'll share this with you. I think this is going to be really, I'd love to get some of your feedback about this offline. But for those of us that are mostly commercial, and we do residential more so just with referrals that come in, we don't really like to do a lot of marketing for that. For all the businesses that you work with, why not create a employee appreciation or an employee special plan? And you provide, because keep in mind, your marketing costs are going to be little to nothing. It's basically what you're investing. Provide a special and position this so that the owners of the businesses or the leaders of the businesses you're working with, you are giving back to their team, if that makes sense. And just like those of us that are leaders of our respective groups, those that like take care of our team or those that are kind to our team, like that's really meaningful, if that makes sense. And I would challenge you to be as aggressive as you can and as much of an incentive that you can with that of the businesses you work with. So I know we're up against time, so I can't get too deep into that. Uh, in terms of the challenge, I should rather say, I want to show you a couple of these things. So I'm just going to skip through things here in terms of some of the takeaways, but the big thing is these downloads that I'm going to have for you here over these next couple of weeks. And I know there may be a couple of other questions that may come up as well. I'd like for you to two things here. I wanted to purposely get to this slide here. So there are 4 tools. I'm going to keep this up for just a sec, and then I'm going to show you the actual tools. Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate that. And we will have your email address. We'll have your email address. Absolutely no problem here. So there are four tools. By the way, if you'd like to schedule time with me, feel free to use this QR code for that. But in terms of these tools, let me just show you here. This is the page that this will take you to. And there are 4 tools, like for example, the budget waste elimination checklist. As you click on this, I'm going to open it up in a new tab. This is something that you can, all right, I've got to download this. You can literally download this and you have several pages of this. That's your actual checklist of things. You take into consideration here, like the budget allocation framework. This will take you to where you make a copy of this. So like I'll make a copy and then you'll be able to open this. I'm not going to spend too much time on this right now, but this will have instructions as to how you work with this sheet. And when you get to the calculator, you'll see here where it says user input. So like, let's say, for example, I'm just going to get started with this team and then you'll understand the logic around this. So like, let's just say our annual revenue is $5 million as an example. And our percentage growth that we're looking for, let's say that we're looking for 10% growth. We want to make sure that we are having, this will let us know what our, I got to make sure that we're in good shape here in terms of this, because I feel like as if there's an issue here with this. My apologies. I may have the calculations not here correctly. But once again, this will help you in terms of like, as you have certain percentages of all of the various types of advertising and marketing, you'll see all of these things here in that regard. So I'll make sure that we send, we'll have this updated today. And when we send an email to everyone, so you have these, you'll have access to this and things in that regard. But that's what all these resources are. We've got a marketing roadmap as well as the ROI dashboard and things in that regard. That's what these resources, but they're all with the calculations and things in that regard. I'll make sure that I personally take a look at that to make sure that we are in good shape with that of all the calculations. And before we send out the recap of today, we'll include the link so that you have that as well. What I want to, just as we're wrapping up, I know we may have a couple of quick questions. Let me just see if I'm looking here. Okay, yeah, I do see a couple of other questions that have just come in, but these are coming directly to me. So this question is, I'm not going to reference you by name because you sent it just the host and panelists, but it's this makes sense, but we're a smaller company, about 1.5 million in revenue. In the 5 to 10% rule, is it still realistic for us, or should we be spending less to start? So okay, it's a good question. I don't know as to where you are, like are you in your first year, your second year? Are you 5 to 10 years? So because this is going to determine that. Like when you're first getting started off, you're going to have to spend a little more time. You're going to have to spend more time and resources from the marketing standpoint and from the sales perspective as you're getting the ball rolling. Keep in mind, regardless as to whether you are a, $500,000 a year business, 1.5 million, 5 million, 10 million, $100 million, that 5 to 10% rule at the very least will hold true. As you are sub $1 million, it may be more than that. And keep in mind, I am not just saying this is going to be equal, going towards Google or going towards, and by the way, when you're first getting started off with little to no revenue, these numbers are going to be huge. I mean, they may be like in the 20 to 50% range, as you're getting the ball rolling. So I hope that that answered your question in terms of whether, from the small company perspective and things in that regard. Uh, if there's any other questions, let me know. Um, okay, there's another question that just came in. It says, so you're looking at the 12-month roadmap and you feel a little overwhelmed. So I know that the spreadsheets that I just shared, and I'm gonna, as I mentioned, I'm gonna just triple check the numbers to make sure that everything is accurate there in terms of the calculations. I do know it can be a little overwhelming. To keep it simple, the things where it says input, that's where you want to enter in some data points, and then ultimately the values will automatically update and things in that regard. Okay, so the follow-up with this is, I don't have a marketing team, it's just me, and I'm already wearing 10 hats. How do I actually implement this? All right. Okay. Well, many of us, to your point, many of us keep in mind, how do I say this? Like many of us, it's like even myself, it's like sometimes at times I'm a little overwhelmed with there's more to do than there's time of the day. I will say this. If you're carrying too many things, you're going to drop everything. You've got to get started modestly. I mean, I'll be really high level with you if you'd like to have a quick conversation, even like a 10-15 minute conversation in terms of where should you get started. First of all, I'm going to talk about next month's webinar where we'll do a deep dive into each of the marketing channels and where should we be allocating our efforts and how, and things in that regard. I challenge you, you would definitely want to be a part of that one. But also get started with some of the usual suspects, like making sure you've got your Google business profile. All roads lead to that of your website. And I'm not saying you have to invest thousands and thousands of dollars of your website, but you want to make sure you have a website that clearly communicates who you are, the customers you work with, what your value prop is, all the things that you do. It's like when you and your team, uh, you know, when you and your team are in the field, want to make sure that what you're communicating is going to be the case and things in that regard, and it's consistent with that. SEO elements are important. Even a little bit of money in local service ads would be really, really helpful and important as well. So I know I didn't answer your question in its entirety, but hopefully that helps. So I know that we're up against time here. What I want to do is keep in mind, like, by the way, the just as a reminder, like the roadmap itself, like the resources, they have a lot of those examples and they're giving a lot of the step-by-steps in terms of, where we should be going and things in that regard. So, in terms of, we have our part two in terms of stop guessing and start growing. So this next month on December 16th, we're going to do a deep dive into the 2026 playbook that separates that of the winners from that of wishful thinkers. So we're going to be, once again, we're not going to be doing any of this, and we're going to be going with eyes wide open if that makes sense. And thank you, Scott. I appreciate you as well. It's very kind of you. And I know a few of you have sent some notes. I sincerely appreciate all the kind feedback. Obviously, if anybody has any feedback for improvements, we're always open to that because we want to make sure that these sessions are as meaningful as possible. What I will say is two things that I'm going to ask you to do is register for next month's webinar right now, because I know once we get off, you're going to be, make sure that you don't forget, number one. Number two, I'm going to go back to this so you can take a screenshot of this. So if you don't mind taking a quick screenshot of this so that you have this on your reference, and then you can download the tools. As I mentioned a little later today, when we send the replay, we will send the link to download the tools so that you're in good shape. And I personally make sure that all of the formulas are in good shape and things in that regard. But, with that said, I know we're a couple minutes over. Sincerely appreciate everyone's time. And I look forward to seeing those of you that will be at ISC East. I look forward to seeing you there. If you'd like to spend some time, thank you so much for that positive feedback. Yes, Bob, we will provide you with the replay and the tools that I just showed. We'll make sure I'm going to double, triple check everything to make sure everything's in good shape. So you'll have access to this as well. And just Bob, for you and for others, if you'd like to schedule some time and we can go through these things together, or if you have any other marketing related questions, would love to see that. And Steve, yeah, Steve, I'd love for us to schedule a time. James, wow. I mean, you guys are awesome. Thank you. I'm not referencing names for everyone. Uh, yeah, I look forward to seeing everyone. Karen, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, make it a great day.